Welcome back to Morning Express. It's State of the Nation this Thursday, and we're looking at the criminal justice system in Kenya and also the condition of our prisons, and a quick reintroduction of the panel that we have this morning. In case you're joining us now, we have Lady Justice Grace Ngenye, who's a High Court Judge, Milimani Criminal Division. We have Jacob Ondari, who's the Deputy Director, Public Prosecution, Lenson, Njogu Regional Coordinator for Legal Resource Foundation, and last but not least, Jasper Ombati, who's the Director for Reforms National Police Service. And again, remember, you're welcome to participate in the conversation, and you can do that via social media as we continue. Now, let me come back to you, Lenson, and would it be accurate to say, based on the audit that was done, that there is then less justice for the poor? There seems to be, or rather, the justice system seems to favor the rich as opposed to the poor.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'll put it this way, that all factors in place really work against the poor. For example, the increased number that we've seen, over 50% that are of petty offenders. If you look at the bail system at the police station, we only got statistics showing us only 2% were able to afford bail. At the courts, it's only 8% who are able to afford the bail that was there. Then for us, the verdict is that there are so many of what you'd also call state-regulated offenses. For example, offenses like selling chocolate along the roads, roasting maize along the roads, who are essentially arrested, not necessarily by the police, but by the enforcement wing, for example, of Nairobi City County.
The county government office.
Yes, and they will end up also finding themselves in prison. And for us, the audit then suggests that there is need for us to, one, decriminalize petty offenders. Because at the end of the day, these are guys who are not supposed to be in prison. They were actually trying to make livelihood for their family. They were roasting that maize rather than kupiga mtu ngeta along the streets. We also need to also looking at administrative solutions to state-regulated offenses. For me, that would be the take. But also, having said that, an interesting also element of the audit was the high overturn rate at which we saw cases. So at the magistrate's level, one would be convicted, they would go to the appellate level, do their appeal, and they'll be overturned. Either person getting liberty, or the court would order for a trial, or the court would suggest a lesser sentence. That has many interpretations. For me, I would focus first on one. Can the poor be able to afford legal aid in Kenya? And for a very long time, we have had the debate that there is need for a legal aid framework in Kenya, which now we have a law that came into place in 2016, the Legal Aid Act, that provides that any indigent or poor person can be provided for with legal assistance by the state. But we have questions also. Do we have resources to
be able to take care of that?
Exactly, because the last time I checked, they only got 50, legal aid service, only got 50 million to be able to provide that service. So for us as a committee that was set by the Chief Justice to look into all this, one of the things, and that's why you see this team here, is that we need a multifaceted approach into looking at the flaws within the criminal justice system. And the good thing is that all the actors have accepted that there is a challenge. And the focus right now is on the opportunities that exist for us to be able to reform the whole criminal justice system.
All right, and I want us to talk solutions. I want us to look at solutions, because one of the things that we find from the report is that the prisons are congested. And out of what we have talked so far, there is more petty offenders arrested, but there's also a gap when it comes to the investigation and prosecution process, because Lady Justice here can only deal with the facts. But let's look at some of the findings, and then we look at the solutions. And looking at some of them, we'll start off with the criminal justice system in Kenya, Audit 2017. Now, the audit findings recommendation, the system clogged with less serious offenders at 68%. The entry point recommendation, the law enforcement agencies to follow the law on a matter of arrest. We also see that 23% of the offences due to commercial and environmental laws and policies recommendation need to be declassified as decriminalization of state-regulated offenses, which is what you have mentioned, and this is because they find themselves in prison in one way or the other. So we could look at how that can be established. Low rate of prosecution of serious offenses is at 5%, and 30% are acquitted. 65% are withdrawn. The recommendation given for that is to harmonize the operation of the ODPP and law enforcement agencies. We also have a finding that to harmonize the operations of the ODPP, the law enforcement agencies established of Prosecution Training Institute, harmonization of resources across the board. So there's quite a number of findings that we get there. And coming back to the panel now, let me start with you, Lady Justice, on what you see as a possible roadmap to having this dealt with, especially the high number of the prisons are congested. Okay. They cannot take any more, yet we still have more petty offenders being arrested and prosecuted.
Yes. The first thing that I would wish to say is that I must reaffirm that that is the position. Yesterday we visited the prison headquarters and we had a sitting with the Deputy Commissioner General. And the statistics that we got were that in the Kenyan prisons there are 118 in the Republic and are holding over 22,000 unconvicted persons. Those people who are awaiting trials. And from now coming to the audit report, you can see that majority of those are those charged with petty offenses. So then, what did the Chief Justice do upon receiving this report? He envisioned a situation where this situation can be reversed. Because it is not just a perception, it has been supported by the data. So how do we reverse this situation? And that is how now this committee was formed, and it has a multi-agency collaboration. All those persons who are involved in the criminal justice system have come in. And one of our objectives from the work plan that we have already drawn, because most of 3 months of last year we sat down to do our work plan, is to see to it that we can reverse that trend. And one of the tasks that we have is to ensure that there is reclassification and decriminalization of the petty offenses. What do I mean by this? Reclassification. Of course, the penal code is what we use mainly in convicting criminal offenders. And in it, we have provisions providing for charging and conviction of the petty offenders. Some of those offenses, honestly, if you looked at them like Section 175, Section 193 of the Penal Code, provide for petty offenses which really no one needs to go to the prison for. Yes. And so we want to remove those petty offenses from the main penal statutes. And we have a provision whereby if you are convicted for those, or you are charged for those petty offenses, then automatically the mandatory penalty is not imprisonment. But we shall provide for other ways that we can be able to.
What is the procedure of having that done? What's the process? And whose office does that?
Honestly, it is not an office that will do that. What I have told you is that this committee comprises many stakeholders involved in the criminal justice system. From here on, we are doing a lot of sensitization on the findings of the audit report. We are going to sensitize them on the recommendations of that audit report and also get views from them, what they think would be the solution. Of course, from our work plan, we have envisioned what we think would be the solution. As what I'm telling you, we reclassify and decriminalize the petty offenses. But again, you cannot impose it on the members of the public.
Right.
You cannot impose it on the stakeholders of the justice sector. So let us get their views and ask them, would this work for you? So that those who are arrested for being drunk and disorderly do not have to go to prison. And automatically, either they go to perform work in the community where they can be more useful. We can probate them.
More of non-custodial.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me come to you, Mr. Ondari. And there also seems to be a gap, especially now when we're looking at the serious offenders. And this gap is down to the evidence that is brought before the court. Many of them seem to go scot-free simply because there was not either enough evidence or it was not well put together such that there is reasonable doubt. How can we solve that?
Thank you, Michael. The office of the DPP for some time now has been having a problem of staff. However, this is now a thing of the past. The office has now recruited prosecution counsel who are lawyers. Initially, you're aware, police used to prosecute on behalf of the office. The police are not trained in law and therefore were not able to sieve the evidence before presenting it to court. If you see, this report was done from 2010 up to 2014, and by 2014 we had reorganized the office and professionalized the office from the initial number of 93 prosecution counsel across the country to the current 627 prosecutors. The purpose of this was to give you the professional approach where evidence is sieved and only cases which merit going to court are taken to court. We have now prosecutors all over the country in all court stations to look at these files, and I believe in a short while we will be seeing these cases coming down, these numbers coming down. And as an office, we have recently launched an initiative to reduce the number of cases pending trial by looking at the remand issues. We have looked at we are actually evaluating all remand cases to see why these people are still in remand. Because
and maybe just to pose you there, are the prisons adhering to the law when it comes to remand? Because one of the things that Lady Justice mentioned from the report is that there seems to be many offenders who are in remand longer than they're supposed to be there.
That, Michael, that is really not the problem of the prison. If suspects are remanded in prison, the prison have no choice but to receive them.
Right.
That is why we have started this initiative to review all remand cases to see whether they really deserve to be in remand. Some people have been in remand. You may be surprised, for 3 years, awaiting trial of their cases. Some of them are not able to raise, as Mr. Lenson said, are not able to raise bond, even if it was 20,000 or even 10,000. And that's why we are looking at ways of reclassifying and decriminalizing some of these offenses, so that if they are commercial in nature, really, you do not have to get this person in jail or in in prison custody for a petty offense.
Okay. Let me come to you, Mr. Ombati. And the police reforms is something that was started a while ago, but many Kenyans will probably complain that they have not seen that percolate to the police service. We still have a police service that is somewhat brutal, they view police officers as the enemy as opposed to a friend. Are we getting closer to where the police service can be viewed as a protectorate? They're there to protect the citizenry.
Thank you. I think it's a fact that reforms in the National Police Service started a while ago. To be very particular, in 2003, the first statements on reforms in the police were made. And I can say that we have progressively made progress. I want to say here that reforms is not a one-off thing. It's a journey that has to deal with cultures and attitudes that have been built over years.
Are there tangible results that you can say this is a result of the reforms that we have had?
Yes, I want to point to the fact that at the moment we have two facets of reforms. One is to do with the hardware. We are talking about the infrastructure. We are talking about the technology that we want to put in place in order to make the National Police Service become a modern policing service in Kenya, to serve the interests of the people of Kenya. For instance, transport was a big issue in Kenya, and this contributed to integrity issues. Now, we have adequate transport. We are not where we were before 2003. This is under the modernization program. Housing is another challenge that has been there, both for police officers and accommodation for police officers and office space. We have a program that has seen new housing units built, and at the moment we have a program that is very comprehensive. We have entered into a partnership with the Kenya Commercial Bank.
Does that translate to a more effective police service?
It has.
And if it does, how? Because we seem not to be feeling that effect.
It contributes a lot. The gains could be there, but not to the extent that people expect. The expectations of the public are quite high. And the police has been there for over a century in Kenya, over half a century in Kenya. And now, what we are doing is we are making gains slowly by slowly. The advancements, the developments which are being made affect the performance of police officers. For instance, if an officer is well housed, is working in a good working environment, you expect the productivity to be high.
Okay. Lenson, from your report, from the report that was raised, what role does the police have, or what would you see as improvements that the police service requires for us to have a better criminal justice system and possibly have more serious offenders, the law take its course on them as opposed to petty offenders?
Well, thank you. There are quite a number of areas of improvement as suggested by the recommendations, and rightly said by my brother Jasper. One is the whole aspect of policy and legislative changes that are required. Of course, I've seen a great improvement when it comes to the review of the police standing orders that is actually now speaking to the new constitution as it is. That's a great milestone that the police have been able to do. But looking at it, there are still other administrative policies that need to be reviewed, and that's the work of this particular committee. And I'm happy that he's here because he is in charge of the Reforms Directorate. Then there is the Police Act itself to speak to some of the issues that Kenyans are not comfortable with, because the policing should speak to the Kenyan people, the aspiration of the Kenyan people, the security of the Kenyan people, and the state in general. Secondly, it's a lot of investment that we must invest in the Kenyan people and also the police in terms of behavioral and attitude change. We have had a culture where on both sides, the police themselves visualize, some of them, I'm very happy most of them have changed, a hard-on policing. But now the Reforms Directorate is telling them it's a service. But also as Kenyan people, we must also be patient. We must know our historical journey from the colonial masters when it comes to policing and be able to support the police on such elements. And the good example always we say corruption. But I've never seen somebody resist and say, I'm not going to give money to bribe a police. It takes two people to tangle. If you give a bribe, you're equally charged as guilty as that person is taking the bribe. So for me, it's a process whereby the Kenyans ourselves, we must support our police service, be able to reach where it's supposed to be.
All right, we need to wind up because of time. Lady Justice, your closing remarks and possibly what Kenyans should expect in the near future as a result of this audit that was done and possibly what the Commission is working on.
I think, as had stated earlier, I said we need to reverse that perception and, of course, what we have seen from the data. But I would, before I do my closing remarks, allow me to say one thing, that from what you have seen in our composition of this committee, there is a lot more that needs to be done, quite apart from the persons that we charge. And I'll give you a very pathetic situation of persons we bring to court who necessarily have not committed offenses. And these are persons who have mental issues. When we visited Mathare Mental Hospital, we were able to have a discussion with the psychiatric consultants. And from their view is that these people who are arrested for attempting to commit suicide are not necessarily offenders, but they are sick people. And therefore, what first needs to be done to them is to take them to a hospital where they can be treated. But instead, you hood them to court. They will be charged, they will be convicted, they will serve sentence, yet this is a person who requires...
mentally ill.
Yes, mentally ill and who requires treatment. The other perspective is of persons who commit other minor offenses related to drugs. Of course, we have people who are smoking bag, little things that we see in the villages. This has everything to do with the psychosocial background. And therefore, from the point of the working of this committee, we shall be dealing with state agencies, the government itself, and recommend policy solutions where we can have, for instance, rehabilitation homes for these persons, where we can ensure that in our laws, when a person is arrested for attempting to commit suicide, they are not taken to the police. And if the police arrest that person, because they have to protect the life of the citizens, they are not hooded into the court system. The other issue that is also of concern is persons who have received the president's pleasure. These are persons who were convicted, but however, were found to be mentally sick. How do you deal with them? Most of them are rotting in that hospital. So can we look for a way that they can be reintegrated into the community? Therefore, we sensitize the community on how they can accept these people back. And there is a lot, and many other emerging issues, just that the time is very short. Currently, we have had incidences where we have people who are licensed to carry guns, have, because of their mental status, reacted in an offensive manner. And currently, and thankfully, Mr. Ombati is here. When you go to apply for licensing to hold a gun, you're being told to go to Mathare, get a letter that you are mentally sane.
Wow.
Where is that anchored in the law? And one of the issues that the doctors are antagonizing with is, what do I write into who?
Allow me to pause you, because we need to take a weather break here and just give a weather update. Then we can come to the closing comments as we are running out of time as we release KTN Home. But on KTN News, we continue with the state of the nation. So for now, let's take a look at the weather. All right, and that's the weather forecast, and we now want to wind up on the state of the nation. Lady Justice, your closing comments on what we should expect.
Yes, my closing comments, I would wish to address the poor offender, the petty offender. I would want to assure them that justice is in sight, and we shall not have the prisons made and built for them, and that we'll ensure that they are punished in a manner that is commensurate with the offenses that they create. They commit. Number two, I would wish to also talk to the collaborators of the criminal justice system and ask them to cooperate with this committee, because we shall come to them, we shall knock on their doors, and more importantly, that they give us the important information that we need, because we cannot do this work solely. As a judge, I'm only holding the flag. The rest are the persons who shall do this work. But this far, we are very grateful to the Honorable, the Chief Justice, for creating this committee. In fact, this will be a milestone for the work that he is in the justice system in his tenure.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, Jacob Ondari, your closing comments.
Thank you, Michael. As a committee, this is not just about the committee. We have a number of agencies involved in this. My closing comment is that Kenyans should come forward and contribute towards the review of these penal laws. The mandate of the committee is for the review of all penal laws in the country. There are a number of laws which are not serving the Kenyan interest and therefore should be either repealed or reformed. We are coming, and I urge Kenyans to come forward and make recommendations. It is not enough to mourn about the bad laws, to mourn about the system. This is the time for Kenyans to come forward and make their contribution in the reform of the penal laws in the country. As an office, we are taking our stock on what we need to do, and we have started with the review of remand prisoners. We have also, as an office, initiated another way of reducing these cases which people remaining in remand for ages by coming up with plea bargaining rules whereby a suspect may need to plead guilty to committing an offense and be sentenced in an earlier way, in a quick and expeditious trial, and therefore reduce this backlog of cases that we have and the remandees in the remand prisons.
Okay, Lenson, Njogu. Thank you. For me, one of the things is looking at the recommendations around county policing authorities. I think I want to say that as Legal Resources Foundation is one thing that would want to work closely with the police and the county government to see the challenges that are there in terms of operationalizing it are realized. But secondly, speaking to the Kenyan people, that the criminal justice system is not always a solution. We have different other options. The Constitution, Article 159, talks about alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So, and the court, judiciary has said, please go for mediation. I'll give a case scenario. If you look at Njogu, the law courts, I've had their statistics yesterday, and they have been able to use ADR to lead to a case clearance of up to 98%. Because people are talking out there.
ADR is alternative dispute
resolution mechanisms. So let's mediate our cases first. Let court be our last resort. Then lastly is the question of embracing plea bargaining in Kenya. This is a new thing. We have only had plea bargaining around issues to do with murder, reduced to manslaughter. But if you look at advanced democracies like America, if I knew I was guilty for an offense and I want to save my time, taxpayers' money, I negotiate with the prosecutor and say, well, I wish to plead guilty. What do you have to offer? And those are things that I'm very sure my brother here have actually been piloting, and he has been working. So it's a call for even other court stations to be able to embrace that.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Jasper?
Thank you, Michael. And I want to say that the National Police Service is the entry point in the entire criminal justice system. And therefore, the quality of investigations that are conducted by officers affects the decisions which are made down the chain.
Whole line.
Now, the National Police Service has taken a stand, and we are committed to ensure that the quality of investigations improve. Why do I say that? Because we want to leverage on technology to make sure that serious offenses are successful in court. You know, cases may be acquitted because of gaps which are left out in files. And therefore, the magistrate has no alternative
but to let it be. We need to wind up because of time. Allow me to pause you there. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, for joining us this morning on State of the Nation. And that's where we're going to wind up. It's now 8 o'clock, and we're going to take a short break. But do stay with us. We have more stories that are making headlines. But also, today being Thursday, we have Tech Central, and we'll be looking at the milestones that technology has brought in the health sector. Do stay with us.